Welcome to our open office hour session today on adding projects to the DDX. My name is Charlotte Vrisen. I'm with the 2030 commitment team here at AIA National, and I am really looking forward to the conversation today. We'll give folks just another minute to join before we jump on in, but I'm really excited to get going. We'll plan to talk through and walk through some of the changes that have been made to the DDX in the past year since the last reporting cycle. And we'll also be doing a demo of the tool itself, of course, and answering all questions along the way. And before we get going, I would be thrilled to know for the folks that are on the line, how comfortable do you feel reporting into the DDX? Have you reported for the past 10 years and you feel like a pro? Is this your first time reporting as a 2030 commitment signatory? I would love to get a sense from folks more or less where you are in your DDX and 2030 commitment journey. So if you don't mind, would love it if you would drop that into the chat while we wait for some additional folks to join us. And we'll be sure to pause at lots of points to ask for questions, but would be really eager to know from the get-go if anyone has anything burning and top of mind that they're really eager to make sure that we cover today. Feel free to drop that into the chat also. First timer, wonderful. Welcome, Molly. So glad to hear it. Marvelous. Couple of first timers. For all those who are just joining us, we are asking folks to drop into the chat how experienced they are reporting through the DDX, and as a signatory, excuse me, of the 2030 commitment as a whole. Really great to hear that we have a range of folks on the line with us today. Again, my name is Charlotte Vrisen. I'm with the 2030 commitment team here at AIA National, and I'm joined by a couple of my colleagues here, including Matt Welker and Paula Capo, who many of you likely know from past open office hours and webinars and booking appointments or over email. Wonderful. Thanks for dropping your experiences on in, everyone. We are really excited for the conversation today. We'll be walking through a number of the changes that have been made to the DDX in the past year since the last reporting season. Of course, this year we're talking about the 2021 reporting year. Just like taxes, we report data for the prior year. And I think with that, we'll get on started and just jump in and walk through a number of the changes that have been made, and then we'll dive into the DDX itself and walk through how to add projects. I'm delighted to know that we have some folks who this might be their first time really going through the tool meaningfully, as well as folks that are intimately acquainted. Wonderful. First time utilizing the bulk import feature. So that's something that we're not going to be covering strictly in the conversation today. That I'm really glad, really grateful that you guys are sharing that up front. So the bulk upload feature is pretty different than using direct input. The same logic, same fields are all included. We did an open office hour session on bulk upload in particular in December, and the recording is available on our YouTube channel. So that will be a great resource to go back to and watch through. My colleague Paula Capo, who's on with us today, had guided that discussion. And Matt or Paula, if you wouldn't mind perhaps dropping that link into the chat as we get started, I'd love to have that at their fingertips. But excited for you to be joining us regardless. This should give you a really great walkthrough of the tool either way, even if you plan on using bulk import, but we won't be covering that spreadsheet and upload process in particular. So with that, let's get started and cover some of the 101s about the DDX. For those who are veterans, they likely already know this, but just to ground ourselves here and why we're all coming on today to talk about reporting through the Design Data Exchange, or as I'll be referring to it, the DDX, is that as a signatory of the 2030 commitment, we're committing towards working towards the carbon neutrality target that the Architecture 2030 set out by 2030. Currently, the target is 80% reduction in predicted energy use intensity. Predicted energy use intensity, or PEUI, is the main metric that we use here when tracking performance and progress towards that target. So you'll hear me referring to PEUI a lot for that reason. Today, we have an 80% target of reduction, of course, working towards that full carbon neutrality goal. That's something that's relevant for all whole building projects that are in the DDX and are reported through the DDX. Interior only projects are something that you are welcome and encouraged to report as well, but predicted lighting power density will be the primary metric you're tracking there, with a different goal of 25% reduction. So we'll be focusing mostly on whole buildings and predicted energy use intensity for whole buildings today, whether it's new construction or existing buildings. And the DDX, if you aren't already intimately acquainted, a snapshot of one's project page is here on the right-hand side. It is a cloud-based tool that we offer for members of, for signatories of the 2030 commitment to report their energy performance data, tracking their own progress towards those goals and reporting in so we can aggregate it and track how the industry, how the profession is doing as a whole towards the goals of 80% reduction of predicted energy use intensity today and full carbon neutrality by 2030. Really important to know, of course, that anything reported through the DDX is confidential and is only rolled up into that big aggregate report once a year in an anonymous fashion. So all the data that you report there is yours and yours alone. And for folks who haven't had the chance to take a look at past by the numbers reports, what we call those annual reports where we crunch the numbers on how everyone is doing together in the 2030 commitment, very much encourage folks to take a look. The most recent by the numbers report was published just a couple of months ago, and is a really great opportunity to understand a snapshot of the program and see how we're all doing towards those targets and how your peers are doing as well. It covers not only the kind of core predicted energy use intensity metrics, but also the optional fields like embodied carbon reporting and many of the fields that we'll go through and look at today. The DDX, as we talked a little bit about just a moment ago, is a place where everyone on a team can come together and track and input data, view the data that's being reported, and see how the portfolio as a whole at your firm is performing. So really encourage that, if your whole team isn't already plugged in and having DDX accounts, please give them a shout and ensure that they're in there. This is a great opportunity this time of year to make sure and kind of go through the roster and make sure everyone is in the DDX that needs to be. For every firm, there's an administrative point of contact who can help add folks if they aren't already. And one can also, as a new user, look up a company to associate themselves with. Not only can employees and everyone at a firm themselves be plugged into the DDX and able to view and access and edit projects in your portfolio, but you can also invite collaborators. So if you have a consultant doing energy modeling for you, or you're the associate or AOR firm and have other firms that you're collaborating with for a specific project, you can add a collaborator so they can view and edit a specific project and without giving them access as an employee for your whole portfolio, which is a really useful way that a lot of folks go about involving people that they collaborate with. So before we jump into some of the changes that have been made to the DDX, I'll pause here just to talk about for a moment the kinds of projects that you'll be wanting to submit as a 2030 commitment signatory. And because the 2030 commitment is all about working towards predicted energy use intensity reduction and carbon neutrality, reaching that net zero carbon goal, we encourage any and all projects that use energy to be reported. So kind of simply put, anything with lighting or HVAC will be something that would be ideal to be reported, but a firm will typically kind of sit down and consider what projects in their portfolio do they want to report and put that in their sustainability action plan. So if you are new and a new 2030 commitment signatory, that's something that you'll be writing within your first year of the program, generally before reporting. If you are a staff member at a firm who's been a 2030 commitment signatory for a decade, you've probably gone through and updated and already edited your sustainability action plan multiple times. But a lot of folks will decide that, if a project is below the square footage threshold, we might not report it. Or if it doesn't meet the certain threshold of person hours that will be working on a project, they might not report it. But generally speaking, all projects that use energy are logical to include, so you can track your own progress and we can ensure all of that progress is also incorporated and tracked as an industry. And we'll go through some more examples of that once we jump into the DDX itself. We had a question or two at the beginning here about bulk uploads. So calling some attention here that we're mostly going to be focusing on direct input today. Really appreciate, Paula, you dropping the link into our bulk upload open office hour, which goes into all the nuances and nitty gritty of the bulk upload process. Really encourage folks to check that out if they have a chance. You don't have to use one reporting method exclusively. A lot of firms will decide to use some combination of bulk upload, direct input, and also using the API that is available for energy modeling softwares to use to plug in and make the process a little more streamlined of reporting energy performance data like PEUI into the DDX. But we'll be focusing mostly on direct input today. A couple of the big important changes that are good to keep in mind as we go through the platform here, and many of you have probably already noticed this if you spent some time in the platform and have experience with older versions of the DDX. One of the big changes that's important to note is that reporting date is now reporting year. So whereas in the old version, you would need to go in and say, this project is, associated with a specific day and a specific month of a specific year, you now just flag that a project and data within a project is associated with 1 year in particular. So when we go through the project, we'll look at exactly where you'll be wanting to add design phase data for 2021, since we're in the 2021 reporting year. Spring of 2022, reporting the prior year's data. Just like taxes. I'm sure that refrain will be drilled into everyone's skulls by the end of this. But the other important element to keep in mind that's very high level and affects a lot of the fields that you see are whole building and interior only as the two new streamlined project types. So we reduced those and enabled you to select one or the other, and that will inform which fields and options that you see and are required for you. So for instance, predicted lighting power density is the main metric tracked for interior only projects, whereas predicted energy use intensity is the main metric tracked for whole building projects. So you'll select one or the other at the beginning of adding a project, and that will inform the options you have for what data you report. We also have some exciting new renewable energy fields that we've added to the current suite of ones offered within the DDX. So not only do you have the option now of selecting between wind turbines, solar photovoltaic, and solar thermal, but you also have the options of selecting heat pump, geothermal, micro hydroelectric, and biomass as options that are being incorporated into a given project. Some new fields and options related to energy modeling as well as embodied carbon modeling. Energy modeling softwares are able to use the API that the DDX offers to streamline some of the input for energy performance data into the DDX for your projects. We've added, 4 in the past year here to be. I'm sorry. Thanks, Che, for that question. We'll take a look at that once we get to the renewable energy section within the platform. There are energy modeling softwares that use APIs to enable reporting. Here we have additional options where one can kind of track the energy modeling software they've used and whether it's been done in-house or out of house in the platform, just in general in terms of what software has been reported. Excuse me there. In addition to energy modeling software being added as options, we have the option to also include dates for energy modeling and embodied carbon modeling, which is something that we heard from you all that would be useful to help best track modeling that's being done iteratively over a project cycle. So even though you're going to be reporting a project and adding design phase data for a year in particular, we've heard that it would be useful for folks who might be doing iterative energy modeling at each stage within a design process or at multiple points within a design phase, that having the specific ability to associate a date with that energy modeling would be useful. So wanting to provide that option in this new version. And last but not least, we have additional energy codes that we've added to the DDX this year, which has been really helpful to hear which would be useful from users like you. So we appreciate everyone who's written in to share that one energy code would be useful to add versus another. These are 5 new ones that are available in the DDX: IECC 2021, California Title 24 2019, ASHRAE 90.1 2019, New York Stretch Code for 2018, and ASHRAE 189.1 to 2020. The full list of code equivalents we have linked here. You're welcome to take a look at those, which are available in the DDX help pages as well, but we won't go into the full nitty-gritty there. But what I will do is stop sharing my screen for a moment and jump over to the DDX, but I would love to pause here and see if there are any questions that we can answer at this stage. Matt, can I ask, have any risen to the top in the chat here that would be great to cover at this point?
Just the question from Jay. And then also a note that the bulk import guide and template for bulk upload are available in the help pages. So you can access them through the DDX or through the help pages.
Wonderful.
There's another question that just came in from, if we're doing an addition, is that counted as a whole building or an internal only project?
Thanks for that question. For an addition, if it has anything to do with the building envelope or the exterior of the building, not just the interior finishings, lighting, it would, I believe, be best to incorporate as a whole building project. But Matt, if I could lean on your confirmation there.
No, I think you're spot on.
Much appreciated. Wonderful. Thanks for that question there. And I'm going to go ahead and share my screen with the DDX now. Is everyone able to see it okay? I'm going to take that as a yes. So here we have a test account associated with Leslie Knope. We're big Parks and Rec fans over here, which many folks are likely already familiar with if you've joined us on a booking appointment to walk through any questions you had or joined us for past open office hours. Here we have where the DDX drops you when you log in, your own personal portfolio page, where on the left-hand side, you see top performing projects that you're associated with. You can filter these by interior or whole building, new construction, existing building, whether something's active or on hold or complete or canceled. And we'll go through over what those statuses mean in particular in just a little bit. On the right-hand side, you can see the account information you have and where you can change key information like your password, your phone number, your email, your location if you're associated with a specific studio at your company, and of course the company that you're associated with, which in our case is Acme View Architects. That's the firm that Leslie Knope works for here today. When you scroll down, you see the projects that you're associated with that either you've added or been added to within your firm. Which is a really great way of kind of a shortcut of going through and jumping into a project to add design phase data or just reference the data that you've already input here. You can search by different fields, filter by different fields. A bunch of the kind of top level, most important information is displayed for you, like your predicted energy use intensity, your PEUI, as well as the portfolios that it's been submitted in the past. So you can go through and see those here, displaying as many as you'd like that you're associated with. Moving over to the next tab at the high level menu option here, your company portfolio is what you'll see next. And this is a really great opportunity to take a look at the firm information that's been added for you, including your commitment letter, your 2030 commitment signatory letter that leadership at your firm would have signed and uploaded when joining the commitment, as well as importantly, your sustainability action plan, which details that all of the ways and approaches that your firm is taking to working towards the 2030 commitment targets of 80% reduction for predicted energy use intensity today. So this will detail a lot of the information, most likely about which projects you'll be reporting, whether they have a square footage threshold where if it's a very small project, you might not be including it. In what phase of the design process might you be going in and adding a project or adding design phase data? Do you do that quarterly throughout the year? Do you only do that during the reporting cycle? So that's a really great opportunity for you to refresh yourself on what protocol is for your firm. And if, of course, if you're a new 2030 commitment signatory and you're in your first year, you've likely not uploaded that yet, but is where you will find that once you do so and complete that process. Scrolling down, you see all of the projects associated with your firm in the same format for the projects that you're associated with on the last tab that we looked at. And some questions about bulk upload I know have come up. While we won't go into the kind of nitty gritty of bulk upload today, where you do go to download the spreadsheet, the template for you to do the bulk uploading is by clicking import right here. So you'll go through here and can download the template in CSV or XLS X format, and you'll be re-uploading it to the same place. So just for your awareness, that's where that's located. You can also at any time export all of the project information associated with your firm here if you'd like to do some detailed analytics that go beyond the capabilities of the reports tab here, which we'll look at in just a moment. We have a lot of firms who choose to do very complicated deep analyses in Tableau or in Excel to take the data dive a couple notches further. When you scroll farther down, we get to some other additional important sections. So Leslie Nopier is an administrator associated with the firm. And for that reason, she has the ability to add and edit the offices and studios associated with the firm. So here we have 5. When adding a project, this is something that you'll associate with a specific project. So you'll say this project is being designed by the Washington, D.C. studio or the San Francisco studio or whichever you might have at hand. Many firms decide that they'll start with 1 or 2 studios in their first year of reporting through the 2030 commitment using the DDX, and then add additional studios in year 2 and onwards just to kind of start somewhere. So very likely Acme View Architects might have decided, okay, we're going to add all of the studios on the East Coast that we have and all of the projects that they're designing for Atlanta and DC and Baltimore this year, and then the next year they might decide to add all the projects and report all the projects for Austin and San Francisco as well. So that's something that'll also likely be articulated in your sustainability action plan. We also have here the list of employees associated with Acme Architects. Administrators have privileges to change these settings and add new employees here. And of course, one can search here to add specific employees to any given project that they need to be associated with if they aren't already. We also have here kind of the central place that you'll be using and referring back to if you decide to use an energy modeling tool that offers API connection with the DDX, where you'll be able to request a user key. So the firm key, same within a firm. Unlike the old DDX, if you're familiar with it and had used it, where there was 1 user key and 1 firm key, here we have the ability for individual user keys to be generated, which we really encourage to build some accountability and enable one to go back and look at where data had originated from in the system and kind of trace that data back. So one will click generate for that user key to be generated. You can use it multiple times. It's not just a one-time key, but it does have a specific amount of time where it'll expire. All you have to do to go back if you're encountering a key that isn't working for you is to go back here and click generate to get a new user key. So it's as easy as that if you encounter that issue. Further down at the bottom here, we have 2030 commitment resources that we really encourage folks to take a look at if you haven't already, including creating a sustainability action plan that works, which is a really robust guide that was released earlier this year by the 2030 commitment team, which walks through all of those important considerations about how in practice you're actually going to go about working towards the 2030 commitment targets and reporting so you can track your progress towards the targets as well. In addition, we have the 2030 commitment welcome kit that's pre-populated here. And then scrolling down, we also have company resources, which you're welcome to add to if there's any specific instructions or information that you hope to have available for employees and yourselves for reference when reporting via the DDX. It's also where your portfolio submissions end up when you do submit your portfolio. So you can keep track of all of them here year after year. And not only year after year, but if you do resubmit a portfolio multiple times in the span of one reporting cycle. Which is definitely more than fine to do, and we'll talk a little bit about. And if we are being overachievers here today, we might make it to the portfolio submission step, but just to show you folks where it is, if you haven't already seen it, it's this 3rd tab here, and it's a really simple process where you select what year you're going to be reporting for. We're reporting for 2021. It's giving me a notice that I've already submitted a portfolio for this year because we've had a couple of these conversations with folks walking them through. So it's just letting me know that this isn't the first document that will have been submitted, but you are welcome to resubmit at any point between now and March 31st. Every year, the reporting season is between December 31st and March 31st, and you can resubmit during that period if you realize you need to add additional projects, correct any project information, or any additional data. Once you submit the project portfolio that you have for a given year, the reports tab for that year will be populated. So because I've already submitted a portfolio for 2021, all of my 2021 data is now populated here, ranging from percent predicted EUI being reduced, energy modeling by percent square footage, the same kind of demonstration for LPD here. And I can also go back to take a look at different reporting years, as well as narrowing it down office by office. So I'd be able to go in and compare that for Atlanta. Atlanta's not doing as good of a job doing energy modeling for their projects as, say, DC is. So you'll be able to go in and do a lot of those comparative analyses if you would like. One thing that we've heard from users very often about over this past year is that it would be useful to have some way of visualizing and seeing these reports before formally submitting your portfolio. So that's something we're actively keeping top of mind and are exploring. But because you can resubmit your portfolio multiple times up until that March 31st deadline, you should feel free that if you feel like you are a lot of the way there and want to see what your reports tab is looking like, how your numbers are crunching right now, you're welcome to submit that portfolio and then resubmit it once you have the full complete picture and all of the data together, or have finished that QA/QC. So that's something that's helpful to keep in mind as well. So now I'm going to go back to the company tab, and we're going to walk through a couple of different ways that you're able to add projects to the DDX. One of the important changes this current year compared to past years in the DDX is instead of reporting by a calendar date, you report by a year. And this has one important implication, that design phase data, there needs to be active design phase data for a project for the year that you're reporting. So it's similar to the advanced function that existed in the old DDX. Here and now, you need to either add new design phase data for 2021 or duplicate 2020 data so that there's something kind of in that 2021 slot that we can pull into your portfolio in order to be submitted. So there's a couple easy ways to do that. So I'm going to scroll down here and find a project for 2020 that Acme Architects here had most recently touched the year prior. So 27 Cardinal Drive was last worked on in 2020. Let's say there's not been a whole lot of progress. It's not proceeded to a new design phase. We really just want to continue reporting it. It's being worked on slowly. It's moving along. And what we're going to do is we're going to click the three-dot icon on the right-hand side. I'm sorry, we're going to go into the project and then click the three dots on the right-hand side for any of the data phases that you would like to duplicate here, and click duplicate for another year. And it'll prompt you for what year you'd like to duplicate it and what reporting phase you would like it to be in. So you could advance it to the exact same reporting phase if you'd like, or you could advance it to the next one if it's moved forward to the next phase. And if there's no additional new information, no new modeling that's been done, no new energy modeling, embodied carbon modeling, no new fuel sources that are being introduced, you don't need to go in and edit any of that additional data. It'll be duplicated exactly as it was in the most recent year. So I've jumped into a project page here. Sorry to have not initially. If you aren't familiar with a project page, this is the kind of top line graphs that you have available at your fingertips. Really easy to use, how you compare graph to see how your project at hand compares to similar projects in the DDX, your firm's average, your most important numbers like your baseline EUI, your target, as well as the predicted EUI that you have for this project. And you have all of your basic project information here, and we'll walk through the process in just a moment about how to add all of that information for a new project. But because a lot of folks will be pulling projects from 2020 along to 2021, duplicating that project is a really easy way of doing it. You can, from your project page, decide to filter for projects that were reported in 2020 if you'd like. And then keeping this page open, you're welcome to open individual projects in a new tab, which is one great way of keeping your filter settings and being able to go through and work through your list of bringing projects along into 2021 for those projects that are carrying along at the same design phase or a new design phase if it's moved along, and to add any additional information that you might need to. But to create a project from scratch, if you are new to the 2030 commitment or just have new projects that have come along in 2021 that you'll be wanting to report, you can do that from either your company page or your portfolio page. Doesn't make a difference. You can select create project here, or go back into your own portfolio and create a project as well. Doesn't make a difference. So we're just going to create one from Leslie Knope's page here. Here is all of the basic project information that's displayed on that project page, and we have asterisks here indicating which are required. So project name, that's something that's required. We're going to put Charlotte's Dream Home, and we're going to say that this is an active project. There are different options here, however. Active is what you're really going to be wanting to focus on to submit all of your active projects that are on the board today that kind of are within the scope of what your firm's decided they're going to report. So everything above a certain square footage threshold, everything that that is, you know, anywhere from schematic design through construction phases, you name it, you'll be wanting to associate that with active. Or if it's something that's been completed in this year, in 2021, that's another option to submit. You'll be wanting to report those projects if they were active for any amount of time in 2021. So if you finished it on January 2nd of 2021, right after the new year, or whether you finished it around the holidays this past December in late 2021. Doesn't matter if it was active at any point in 2021, that's something that you'll want to submit and report on for including in your portfolio to get credit for that great work that you've done. The two options for on hold and canceled are two options that we've added due to user feedback, knowing that it might be helpful for you all to track for one reason or another projects that you have worked on, but that weren't able to be completed or haven't yet been able to be completed yet. So a project that's on hold might be something that you worked on for a few months in 2021, and then for whatever reason, the owner decided to put the brakes on it for now. But that's kind of a way of putting it on ice and keeping track of it. So you know that all of the data and energy modeling and design data that you've added is still together and in the DDX, but it's not an active project that you are working on this minute. Canceled is similar, but really for a project that, you know, isn't coming back. So for whatever reason, the client's gone out of business, or, you know, who knows, that's something that you can select to include the work in your portfolio for your own data tracking purposes, for something that won't be moving forward to completion. So on hold and canceled are available to you, but something that is really would be for your purposes, wouldn't make so much of a difference for the 2030 commitment and for tracking the data at a high level, since they aren't kind of active projects that are being worked on. But we're going to say that this is an active project. For project type, this is where you select one of those two options that we talked about earlier, interior only or whole building. And this is a really important stage because it sets up the fields that you have in the next phase when you're adding design phase data, and it impacts the fields that you'll have to choose from. So we can't switch this once we move past this page. So we want to think through whether it's going to be an interior only project or a whole building project. We're going to be looking at a whole building project here. And then we have the firm project number. So this is something that as a default setting is automatically populated by the DDX, which you are able to override with anything of your choosing if you'd like. The important thing to know is that it has to be unique within your firm. So I wouldn't be able to have this exact project number for multiple projects. A lot of firms choose to use an accounting code or another internal indicator that aligns with the database, or any way that you track projects across phases. So you can absolutely override it and you know, put any numbers that you'd like there. So we're just going to override it with that string of numbers for the time being. We also have construction type, new construction or major renovation of an existing building as an option. So for that question earlier about the addition you might be adding, you would select renovation of an existing building. And we're going to click new construction. We're also going to select a studio here. So this will enable you to sort and filter on the backside in your reports what studio this is associated with. We're going to say it's in DC. We're based here in DC. And I'm going to go ahead and plug in the postal code and the city, as well as the state. If only DC was a state, but we have it in the list anyway. And from that, it's going to populate the climate zone. So in DC, we know it's climate zone 4A. It's a mixed humid climate. You're welcome to override this if you have a microclimate that you're aware of. Let's say I'm in a particularly swampy, hot neighborhood of DC. I might change that to 3A warm humid instead of 4A mixed humid. But you're welcome to change that if you have better, more granular data at your disposal. One thing to keep in mind is that for international projects, this isn't automatically populated for you. So if you are creating a project, designing a project that's outside of the US, we do provide in the help pages a table where you can go through and make an informed decision about what climate zone might be most comparable to the location that you're in. But that's one of the few differences between international projects and anything in the US and Canada, which we'll be looking at a couple other instances of as we go through and create this project. But just for you to be aware of here. So I'm going to set that back to for a mixed humid. And you can also select your units here. We're going to go with Imperial and save and continue. Some firms decide that the accounting department or someone who's managing the contract or the project manager will set up that first phase and then save it and have it click complete later, and the project team will then take over from that part. Other firms will decide that, you know, the owner, the project manager for the team, the principal, whoever might be responsible for adding all of the data throughout the process. Totally depends on what would work best for you. The next phase of information we have here to be added is estimated occupancy year and energy code use. So those are the two really important pieces that you'll need to add here. The additional fields on daily average occupants, estimated building costs, site works costs, construction costs, are fields that we've heard from users might be useful for their own tracking purposes throughout the DDX. So nothing that's required, but you are welcome to add it if that would be helpful for you. So we'll say that the project will be completed in 2023, we think. And then you can also select the energy code here, which is really important since that this is what the estimates that the DDX creates are founded upon for your baseline, and if you don't choose to do any energy modeling. And we're really excited to see and strongly encourage more folks to use energy modeling. We're thrilled that a vast majority of gross square footage reported in the DDX is using energy modeling today, but either way, you will want to thoughtfully think through what energy code you're going to use. We're going to pick one of the new ones that we've added this year for the DDX, IUCC 2021, however, and scroll on down to configuring my use type. So this is something that we get a lot of questions about for projects where you might be designing several buildings on one lot, for instance. So let's say you're designing 4 multifamily buildings. There's a couple of different ways you can go about reporting that into the DDX. You can create a whole new project for each building if you'd like, if that would be best for you, and call them, you know, Charlotte's multifamily building A, Charlotte's multifamily building B, any naming convention that makes sense to you. You can also go through and create one project and then add different use types. So here, these are aligned with ZeroTool, and we have the breakdown of how they're mapped to ZeroTool in the DDX help pages for anyone that would like to dive into the nitty gritty. But just for instance, we can go down to, let's say, residential multifamily, 2 to 4 units. And what you can do is either add the total area and square footage for all of your small multifamily buildings together. Let's say that you're designing 4 buildings, each with 10,000 square feet. You could add 40,000 square feet here and proceed with your project that way. You could also add individual use types for each line item of your multifamily building. So we could go through and add 4 different instances, each with 10,000 square feet here. So there's a few different ways you can go about approaching it. This is something that will probably make sense for you to be consistent with throughout your portfolio, and something that would be great to include in your sustainability action plan. For me here, we're going to say it's single family attached. And while I would love to have 10,000 square feet, let's make that 2,000 instead. So based on the energy code that I've selected and the use types here, the DDX will give you a baseline of what you would anticipate, as well as the target based on kind of the default setting, the default assumption that I'm shooting for 80% reduction relative to the baseline, in line with the current targets for the 2030 commitment. But I can override this and set a custom baseline if I would like. So a couple instances where this might crop up. One instance is if you're doing a major renovation of an existing building that was built 100 years ago. If my dream home is being renovated and it was built in 1920, it's not going to be being built to code that exists today. So I might go in and put a higher baseline and put 60 EUI here. Conversely, if I know for a particular reason that I want to, for instance, an international project, this is the second big area where an international project is different. Because ZeroTool pulls for information for US and Canada, not internationally, for an international project, you'll want to set a custom baseline. So we encourage you to use EdgeTool if that's the case for you, and find a baseline that's more accurate for your use case, in which case I'd be able to enter it here. Let's say, for whatever reason, I wanted to use a baseline of 35 because I know it's in a place that ZeroTool isn't drawing information from. I'm going to save and continue. So here we have the target, the last step of setting up your project. As we mentioned a little bit before, it's going to assume you want to use the default 80% predicted energy use reduction target for your building aligned with the 2030 commitment, unless you tell it otherwise. Acme View Architects, my firm might have a different target. Maybe it's a little less aggressive. Maybe it's 70% reduction. I can go in and raise that target a little bit. So I'm not shooting for an EUI of 7. I might be shooting for an EUI of 10. For example, conversely, maybe I have a client who wants us to design a net zero carbon building, and I want to lower that to 0, 100% reduction in predicted energy use intensity. So that's an opportunity for you to go in and adjust it in whichever direction you need to, if you need to, for one reason or another. The last piece here that we'll touch on before adding design phase data itself is the box and whisker plot that's used that shows how your project relates to similar peer projects in the system. So here we can identify the current project use type I have. So let's say I want to compare my project not only to single family attached, but I also want to compare it to small multifamily 2 to 4 units, kind of similar use type. I can select both, so it's pulling both in. I can also select a climate zone. So it's showing me how I compare to people. Maybe I don't want all climates. Maybe I want my for a mixed humid climate only. It'll reset the information to only be pulling in peer projects with that information. So that narrows the amount of projects it's comparing it to in the DDX, and it'll tell me right there if I hover my cursor over it that it's pulling in 60 peer projects. But maybe I want to kind of get a sense of similar regions. So we'll select all the 3 and 4s. That'll expand it out a little bit. So here I'm able to see how my project compares not only to my company target. Acme View Architects has a less aggressive target of 55%, and it'll show how I'm compared to it here. It'll show code equivalency, as well as the low, median, and high side of what we're seeing in the DDX here. And this is really helpful to be able to see and go in and see what's been demonstrated as possible within the 2030 commitment community so far, and how you compare. It's really exciting to kind of definitely encourage folks to go in and play around with this if you haven't already killed more time than you anticipated doing so. It's a really great tool to be able to use. So we're going to go ahead and save it. And this brings me back to that project page where all of my project information is listed. And it's telling me up here that track design progress is not complete. This is a really helpful banner just to make you aware that the project's been set up, but you've not put in project specific data to it, which we need to do in order for it to be submitted with your 2021 portfolio. So it's not telling me how I'm progressing towards my goal, nor is it telling me my savings relative to the baseline because I've not put in any data yet, which I can do right here. You can also scroll down past all of this project information you've added to go in and add design data here. This is where it's all going to be aggregated over the lifetime of the project. All of your design phase data for different phases will be listed here all together. So you can go in and add design phase data from the top or down here at the bottom. So these options, I'm just going to go over them, pan through them so you can see them all in one view here before going through each. And here the important part to start with is the reporting phase. We're just starting off here, so we're going to select concept and we're going to select 2021. When you go through and add a project, your firm might decide that you want to go in and at every design phase re-add and track data throughout the life cycle of the project. So you might be going in iteratively to this project and adding information at concept, at schematic design, at design development, at construction documents, and at construction administration. Or you might decide that, you know what, we only want to go in February and March and add whatever the most recent phase is for our project that took place in 2021. So, maybe we started at concept in early 2021, but by the end of it, we were in design development. So that's the information that we're going to add and track. Totally depends on whatever would be best and most useful for you. But some 2021 data needs to be in here for it to be included in your portfolio submission for the year 2021. So that's the important piece to remember. Now, if you haven't done any energy modeling for this project, you can basically end here, and the DDX will estimate the savings relative to the baseline, assuming you're designing to code, that whichever code you selected when adding the project. You can certainly add optional fields if you want, even if you've not done any modeling, including window to wall ratio down here, but let's assume that we have done energy modeling for this project. We're gonna flick predicted energy use intensity on. Has energy been modeling done for this design phase? Yes, we're gonna click that and go through. It's gonna give us the ability to add a specific date for modeling. And we're just gonna, let's say February 2nd for 2021. As we looked at above, your reporting year is what's important. That's how the system will pull in information. Your date energy model is more so for you to be able to track the details of exactly when energy modeling took place. Maybe during design development, I did 3 energy models. So I might want to be able to have the date associated with that. So it's really clear to everyone on the project exactly what was done when, for instance. We're going to select an energy modeling tool. We'll do energy plus other, and we'll say that I did it on the architecture team, not that I'm an architect, but we'll select that so we can keep track of who did what. And if you'd like to add the cost for your tracking purposes, you are certainly welcome to do so. And we can either add the predicted energy use intensity, whatever the system is telling you, you can expect the PEUI to be, or we can add fuel sources to derive the predicted energy use intensity that way. So I can either go ahead and add 20. Let's say that the system told me that the energy modeling software told me that I can expect a PEUI of 20. I can go ahead and add that, or I can click fuel sources on and go through. And if I have on-site renewables that I anticipate will generate that many kilowatts per hour, I can add that. And then the rest of grid electricity that I anticipate it to use. And the DDX will calculate based on those parameters you put in what the predicted energy use intensity will be. We looked at on-site renewable, or we talked a little bit about renewables earlier. These are different options you can track for what's being used on-site or off-site in your project. There's a really phenomenal AIA resource, the AIA Primer on Renewable Energy, that we super strongly encourage you to take a look at if you haven't already and are thinking about incorporating or are incorporating renewables on or off-site. It's a really fantastic resource. Let's say that contrary to what I put in there, no renewables are being used in this project. We'll just keep that off. I can add lighting power density LPD information if I have it. This is what interior only projects are going to be focusing on and tracking. And then of course, if I have any embodied carbon data, I'm also able to track it here in a very similar way, picking the date, the predicted embodied carbon and the tool, as well as additional parameters about the scope of the life cycle analysis that was done within the project. Embodied carbon fields here are optional and are something that we introduced to the DDX last year. So we're really excited to be able to offer expanded opportunities for folks to track project data related to embodied carbon. We're really thrilled that 55 firms did report embodied carbon project data in one way, shape, or form for a few hundred projects total in the most recent reporting year. So we're really excited to see if and how that grows this coming year. Once you've selected, we're going to say that no embodied carbon modeling has been done. Once you've selected all of those fields that apply to you, we'll click save, and then we'll have some of this populated, whereas it didn't prior. We'll have the progress towards our goal in the design development phase. And as project phases go through and have information added, it'll add dots and construct a line so you can see the trend. And then based on the PEUI of 20 that I've put in, that my energy modeling tool told me, we have a savings that we can expect of 43% relative to the baseline. Scrolling back down here, just to kind of hammer home, you can add design phase data for every phase in as you move through them. You can add, just the most recent one that occurred in 2021, whatever is best for you, but it does require at least one 2021 design phase data, whether you're adding it new or you're duplicating it like we looked at initially, one way or the other into the system for when you submit your portfolio. And before we pause for questions, really quickly, I'm going to just pan over to the portfolio submission pane here, where you select 2021. And just so you all can get eyes on it, we'll focus on this much more in the next open office hour that we're offering in early March. But just so you can get a sense of how this looks for the many new folks we have on the line, by default, all of the projects that have any 2021 design data associated with it will be automatically pulled in and selected by default. So you can go through and confirm that this reflects your company's full portfolio and submit it. It's really as easy as that. The only thing that you want to keep an eye out for is if you have any test or dummy data in here. Let's say that Crystal House was for Acme Architects, a fake project that we have in here to teach new hires how the DDX works. I might want to uncheck that because it's not a real project. I don't want to be reporting that and including that in our portfolio submission. But we will cover that much more in the next open office hour. And I'd love to switch to questions now, knowing that we have 10 minutes here. So Matt, can I ask what questions might we want to start with here?
Absolutely. So one of the first questions is, can you change the name of your project down the line?
Oh, a great question. Yeah, you should be able to, but I'm realizing I don't know if I've ever gone in and done that, in fact. Matt, can I ask, have you?
Yeah, great. You can. The only piece of information that you can't change down the line is whether the project is whole building or interior only. And again, that's because it determines fundamentally what your reporting unit is. You can down the line say that your project was an Imperial and want to switch to International Standard. You can do that. You can also change your project name. You can even change your project number. You know, if your naming conventions change, for example, you can go in and do that. Again, the only piece you can't change is your project type. Another question for you coming up, it's again around how we classify a project. So an existing building, no major updates to the HVAC or envelope. You're only addressing lighting and interior fit outs. It's only a few floors of the building. Would it be correct to categorize that as an interiors project with under the major renovation?
Yeah, that's exactly what comes to mind for me. That would be a good fit for that project. So if it's only interior fittings, furnishings, lighting, we're not doing anything to the building envelope, that would be kind of the perfect candidate for an interior only project. Absolutely.
So another question, one that I'm going to queue up and the other which I'll go ahead and field while you get it queued up, Charlotte.
Sure.
So there's a question about how you can export a record of the projects that you've submitted in a previous portfolio. So if you can get that queued up. The second one has to do with some confusion I think I caused last time we did an open office hour. If your project is a whole building project, the system, and it hasn't been energy modeled, the DDX can calculate an estimate for your PEY % reduction. The system can't guess or predict an LPD % reduction. So if you're reporting an interiors project, you do need to include at minimum the design phase, the reporting year for that design phase, and your LPD value. Last time when I demoed on a whole building project, I said you can just do the design phase and the reporting year and press send. And that is true if your building is a whole building project and you're using our code equivalents, but it is not true if you're using an interiors project. You do need to provide your LPD. So with that, Charlotte, can you show us where to find a copy of our previous design submissions?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a couple of ways that one might want to go about viewing information related to previous submissions. So one way you can do that is back on your company page under Manage Projects, you can filter for a specific year and it'll pull up the projects that you have related to it and you can click Export. So that's one way that you can extract that information. You can also scroll all the way down in your company profile and you can see all of the previous submissions for your firm. So whether you submitted, let's say that last year in the 2020 reporting cycle, Acme View Architects submitted 3 times. You know, we submitted once and we realized we needed to do QA QC, so we submitted a second time, and then we realized we, forgot one thing on one project and had to submit that a third. All of those CSV files for your portfolio submissions will be housed here under your company resources.
Awesome. A few more questions. One, going back to the difference between geothermal and heat pump. For the purpose of DDX, heat pump is referring to an air source heat pump versus a geothermal, which would include geothermal heat pump. We can look at clarifying that after we get through the reporting cycle. Any changes we introduce to the nomenclature runs the risk of interrupting your guys' data, interrupting especially for those bulk imports. But yeah, so for heat pump, it really is referring to the air source, and that's the difference. There is an AI resource on renewable energy sources, which I can drop in the chat in a moment, or perhaps Paola can. That's a great resource that does touch on that concept as well. So another question for you, Charlotte, do mixed use buildings need to have each use type broken out? So for example, a commercial space ground floor and then several floors of multifamily residential.
Yeah, great question. That's exactly what you would want to do. So you would want to go in and add one use type for that ground floor commercial and add, 40,000 square feet, whatever was appropriate, and then go in and add a second line item for multifamily residential. Sounds like it'll probably be more than 5 units. I think it's 2 to 5 and then 5+ is the categories that we have that map with zero tool. So you'll be able to go in and add that total square footage associated with all of the multifamily above it. And you don't have to break it out more specifically. So let's say there are 3 floors of multifamily. You don't have to add 3 line items with, the square footage for each floor, but you do want to go in and add the use types in total for that project when they do differ or when you have multiple at hand. Great question.
Awesome. A question around the distinction between submitting a project or submitting project data and then submitting your portfolio. Why are they different, and why is that so important for folks to know as they go through the reporting process?
Yeah, a great question. And I would appreciate, Matt, if you can expand on this too, if you have any additional thoughts, but it's a really good distinction. And I hope I wasn't conflating terms as we walked through, since they are different. So you add a project and then you submit your portfolio. So you submit your portfolio of all the projects you've added that have active design phase data for the reporting year. Right now we're reporting for 2021. And you can go in and add projects at any time. So you can go in and add projects retroactively for, let's say that Acme View Architects just joined the 2030 commitment last year, but we've been around for 10 years. You can go in and add projects for any year you want. So I could go back in and add every project we've ever worked on. So I can keep track holistically of all of our energy performance data over the years, all the way back 10 years prior. So I can go in and add projects for, 2010, 2011, et cetera. But when I submit a portfolio, I'm submitting a portfolio for all the active projects for a given year that were on the board during those 12 months and 365 days. So we can go in and add projects at any time. Right now, you could go in and add projects for 2022. Excuse me. Let's say that our firm decided that we're going to create a project and add design phase data at every design phase, and we're going to go ahead and add the project whenever it starts. We can go in and add and say that on, we can go in at February 10th and add a project for 2022, but that's not going to be something that happened in 2021. So we're not going to be submitting that as part of our 2021 portfolio. I hope that makes sense. But Matt, if you have any additional thoughts there, it's a really good question. And I know that kind of semantic issue is a tricky one.
I'll offer 2 alternate perspectives that will either clarify or complicate it. Another reason for the difference is, one thing I've seen a lot of firms do is add a project which is called like test project or educational project that they use to like share with their staff, and they'll frequently flag that as a canceled or an on hold, and they'll give it a really distinct name. Sometimes you see like the pound symbol in it. When you go to submit your portfolio, that's a fake project. You don't want to include it. And so the portfolio submission lets you toggle it out to exclude it. The other way, which is more to what Charlotte said that I would think about, is sort of like taxes in some ways. Again, I love the tax metaphor. They're very much on my mind this time of year. In some ways, DDX is a little bit like you're bringing in all of your, W-9s or 990s or whatever your forms are. And you're working on them, but the moment where you're converting and then sending to the IRS or your state tax agency is when you're submitting it into that report, and it's that final step. In the same way that you're doing that, then it's really important that you're doing that with us, and it's delivering a snapshot. And that snapshot that gets saved as a CSV within your company profile, so you can go back and easily download that. And that record is the record that's populating your reports tab. So again, like Charlotte said, you can go in and change the data on your projects. You can add additional projects or et cetera, right? But by submitting the report, you're submitting a snapshot that's just verifying at that time what you intended it to be. We're right at time, but I'm gonna squeeze in an answer to another question, which is around if you're using Zero Tool to calculate the baseline separately, go ahead and do that. You might end up with a different answer than what the DDX is gonna pull. We've seen this a couple times in the inbox recently. The DDX sends your basic project information to Zero Tool. It receives your sort of bottom line number, but it makes some assumptions in the process. It assumes default heating and cooling days. It assumes default information around a variety of factors that vary by use type. So if you go to Zero Tool and you adjust that information, you might end up with something that's a little more specific to your project, a little more accurate to your project. Go ahead and use that number and enter it by setting a custom baseline like Charlotte showed us, and just flagging it Zero Tool adjusted or Zero Tool calculated, something that makes sense to you to understand that it's not just the Zero Tool default. With that, Charlotte, if you want to wrap it up and bring us home, we're right at 3 o'clock Eastern.
I would be thrilled to. And thanks for jumping in there, Matt. I would leave everyone with the ask that please join us for the 2 additional open office hour sessions that we have lined up for March 2nd, the same time slot, 2 to 3 p.m. Eastern, as well as March 21st. We'll spend the first one walking through how to submit your portfolio in more detail, and then we'll reserve the last one for any potpourri smorgasbord of questions that you might have for us. And we definitely encourage folks, reach out in the meantime if you have any questions whatsoever or anything we didn't cover today you're still curious about or has sparked more questions for you. Don't hesitate to email us at 2030commitment@aia.org, and we would be thrilled to set up time to talk and walk through and screen share with you one-on-one, help troubleshoot, answer any questions that you have as well. But really appreciate everyone joining us today and for all of the wonderful, thoughtful questions you all have asked. They're all really excellent, and really hope to see folks down the line on open office hours or to talk with you offline about anything that we can do to help make the reporting process easier between now and March 31st. So with that, I'll say have a great rest of your afternoons and days, and we'll talk to you next time.